Report from the North Base Camp Medical in Sioux City. This first extraction militia team involved in the northern sector came back early, a little over a day ago, and I'm happy to report though that they brought back a good deal of survivors. It's difficult to count, but it seems to be in the hundreds. The vehicles they had wouldn't hold everyone, and some were on foot and appropriately injured. I'll discuss health reports in a moment, but it overloaded our intake process, so we were forced to make a base camp holding area outside the main shelter community. The biggest problem we foresaw was that the convoy was attacked on two separate occasions by infected individuals, meaning that even though they were able to repel the attacks, it's possible we could have a great deal of basically injured and even more so infected. Those who were rescued were required to build this holding space, selecting the most fit to first be put into circulation. Basically, it's a fencing system with a main general intake to a secondary holding area with a quarantine space and what we're calling a dead pool area. All military personnel using hazmat and breathing apparatus, and we sourced all of those individuals from the militia group that brought them back, which is a great system to use for any of those in intake so that they can take care of that space, still being part of their command and responsibility. Everyone in our group has been cleared as well, so those militia individuals were very capable of taking on that duty. In the initial intake, we do a quick pass-fail system for those coming in before they're allowed to enter a general pool of observation. If we're not sure of the pass-fail, we have a temporary quarantine in place to observe anyone that are possibly ill. If they fail, the stringent rules will force us to euthanize anyone that we understand are infected, and there are other cases as well that I'm going to be discussing in a moment that may apply. We are happy to say a zero tolerance policy does not allow us to release anyone back into the wild, especially those that are infected, or as we quickly judge those that promote infection, which requires them also to be liquidated. You don't have to agree with this, but leadership has endorsed this process to continue to the protection of the new border, and it will be enacted without prejudice. And we are recommending that all areas that have teams coming back with survivors adopt this system. The general injury is boils and lesions from travel, but most are emaciated, weak, tired, malnutritioned. Feeble would be the best description, and there are no exceptions with that definition. We're seeing almost all have some sort of vitamin deficiency, including vitamin D, and we're seeing associated illnesses. Immune system compromisation is evident in pretty much 100% of the people coming in. In short, they're all sick from something, whether it be as mundane as a fungal infection, bacterial infection, to the flu and the common cold. Nasal distress is our new buzzword in general population. We've gone to more herbal remedies to assist with it, as they would quickly go through our supply of nasal medication in mere minutes. We do have more serious ailments, and it's something we have to be aware of, but it would be impossible to list all of that here, just to keep an eye on it. For instance, it's going to be tough to stop things like measles, and we can no longer inoculate for it, and anything catchy is going to run rampant. And I think it'll be based on the groups, and even worse when they merge. We could have cross-pollination. We're going to need at least TB tests as well, so that's something we need to put on the list. The truth is most aren't getting the proper testing, and it'll be a while before many are properly cleared for general shelter community. But with the space that we have, even the ones that seem perfectly healthy, we have to be careful of. Still, the only big concern we have is that they aren't going to eat other residents, so we're going to have to tolerate the past test, and if they aren't dying from something else, they make it in. So there is a tertiary and secondary system that goes into play of not just being infected, but more things that can involve that infection. What is the most unfortunate is the amount of people infected. The percentages reach as high as 20%, and that could go even higher. Our quarantine section filled up within the first hour, and it's forced us to move the goalpost on one qualified for general population and set up medical tents in those areas. Our biggest concern is twofold, as I was stating. The people who are actually infected pose a risk that we can't ignore. They need to be kept out of the shelter community without exception. But the concern that most people are not understanding is that any potentially fatal illness, even the most rudimentary ones, now become an infection creator, meaning everyone, anyone that's sick, immune compromised, people are potentially, they're infection bombs. So minimal illnesses become huge illnesses, especially if they become fatal, which is something that we need to be reticent of. They need to be perfectly healthy, as much as we can consider healthy in these times, before they're let into any sort of shelter community. And there can't be any exceptions. We'll have to put people to work if we're going to keep up with the supplies as well. Many were shocked that we had fuel or any supplies or any medical, but those generators are going to be lifesavers, and the ability to record medical records properly will be also lifesavers down the road. But that's the thing is there are people that are seeing this as organized, and I think that once we see that as being a place that people can come to survive, we have to be aware that those numbers are going to increase, even if there aren't survivor teams looking for them. So, and in a word on the infection itself, it seems to be happening slower than before. The people who got sick don't develop that telltale fever as urgently as they did before. A person bitten could have more than 48 hours if we're reading this information adequately. Before it was rapid, but now it seems to be transformative. Part of it being liver failure, turning subjects yellow, limiting their ability to heal injuries, and in some cases they will barely bleed from cuts. Their blood slowly changing into a new substance that we can now visibly see. The damage to their brain, though, causing severe headaches, body aches, especially keeping an eye on neck pains now seems to be the big goal. It's the same as someone saying that they have a chest pain. It immediately should engender a reaction in anyone that can hear it. So neck pains as well as chest pains and other serious things, those have got to be your priorities. Anybody who is seriously sick can potentially become infected. So people need to be treated in a way that they're treated, but moving people to a quarantine space can also be problematic if they are in the process of changing, if you will, or turning. It's all going to also make them violent. Some have seemed to be rabid, and putting them down will just lead to getting back up later. So sometimes in these cases you have to be very careful about what you're seeing and determining the difference between someone who is pre-infected, who is running and being actively energetic in the face of their lethargy, versus someone who has effectively turned and has no energy whatsoever, moving at a much slower pace. There is an identification difference there, and we've seen a lot of people making those kind of mistakes in the past, and I don't think that's going to be anything different now. One of the big things that we have to overcome, obviously, is going to be informative to the people involved. The answer is always going to be damage to the brain or the brain stem, separation of the head. Any of that stuff, even minimal damage, can cause dysfunction in the specimen that you're encountering. I hate to be cold about that, but it's the best way to how to explain it. The transformation, in general, especially for those who are still alive, is an awful way to go. And seeing people fight to stay alive in this state is just short of being horrifying. We have had a couple of intake officers that needed to step off the bay because of it, and it's understandable. I ask that anyone leading these groups to show compassion in these positions. The intake area is the worst. If people need breaks, they need places to go to wear some of this off. The stress levels are going to be extremely high, especially people that are asking or actively denying that they are infected, when you clearly see that they are, and then they could have other people with them and loved ones with them, and we're going on a one-to-one basis kind of judging things, and we have to, in a subjective manner, and we're not really taking into account the psychological effects that are going on that will evidently take a toll on the personnel that are in these areas. So if it requires a constant changeover of guard, that's an option. But if people do say that's not the job for them, then listen to them, because if they are judging poorly, we need a subjective application of understanding if we're ever going to get the results that we want. If we have people that are showing signs of feelings, in other words, someone has a loved one and says, hey, I just want to hurt that loved one through, and we're not doing that based on subjective understanding, we're causing a huge problem for those in not only the holding area but also in the shelter community. If they are able to get through and are somehow sick, we could end up with some very bad results. So make sure the personnel that are working for you are properly subjective, understand the rules, understand the seriousness of what's going on, and a little bit more resilient in the kind of pleas that they're going to hear that are not going to be effectively logical or could be based on self-preservation when they do not realize that their self-preservation is there is no self-preservation once you're infected. If you've gotten involved in that, then it's already over, and these things that we're doing should be considered humane in its action, not monstrous. And I think that a lot of people may have a problem with that thinking, and they need to be trained on it to think otherwise. So the other concern I'm having that I've remained mostly quiet on is the lack of children. There are no children in this group, and I have heard of young adults, but there are no babies, no one below the age of 14 or 15. I don't know if that's just because of the idea at this point everyone is sick and it's putting a toll on childbearing or child rearing or childbirth, or if it's something more sinister. There is no way of parsing that together or doing any sort of research without thorough questioning, which at this time we just don't have the time to really go over that. And it's something we're going to need to keep an eye on. The shelter community also sees very low birth rates, and children need added scrutiny because of the situations. Again, there may be a psychological component here, and it wouldn't shock me if there was. There have been some horrifying stories that I've heard, but I've not been able to confirm them due to the situation that we're in. So I'm sure we're going to run into it at some point, but I think right now it's one of those things that people are so horrified that they don't want to talk about it, or maybe they're so horrified that the idea of childbirth in general. But yeah, we need to determine whether this is either psychological, physical. If it is physical, what's it associated with? The other concern is those that actively want to infect people. And this part really was probably the most eye-opening for me. A sort of eco-embracers, if you will. They're actively trying to infect people. And it's not an organized effort in some cases, although in some cases it is. In general, it just seems like an ideology that the most depraved of our society have begun to adopt. And it's a big concern. While most reject the infection, these individuals look to embrace the illness as sort of our future and even tend to have sympathy for it. And it seems to come from a group of people that originally tried to, for lack of a better term, coexist with the infection or with the undead, if you will. They don't seem to fully understand even what they're supporting, and find difficulty in explaining it. But they're people that they're collecting heads, they're collecting bones, infected items. They are, for lack, the best term I would say is non-compos mentis, but their goal is not personal infection per se, but the sort of acceptance of this being our future, which is, I think, why they're considered more dangerous than even the infected, because there isn't a logical application to what they're doing. I've heard discussion of possibly adding infected items to food sources, water sources, with the idea of getting other people sick, or And maybe they feel like they want to hang out with them, or basically they just want to open the door and allow the sick to mingle with us. I don't know if they were actually doing that. I would see that they couldn't, or the difficulties involved with a living person involving themselves with a group of infected individuals, but it's completely possible, and maybe that should be part of our questioning process in the future. But regardless, they're completely disconnected from reality. I would think the results would eventually hurt them as well, but the goal is going to be basically to put them down as well before we find out what their inevitable goal is. And the reality of our world is, in any situation that allows this infection to survive, will result in more infections and eventually our eradication. We all need to have a zero policy in place. And will that result in more people being liquidated? Yes, of course. But that's how it has to be. The only option left at this point is if we give even a single inch, that there will be nothing left of humanity. The infected do not reason. They are not human. They devour. And I find it funny that they're exactly what some individuals claimed humans were on the earth before, which is a parasite. If they are left unchecked, they will devour anything, everything alive, and change into its system, basically making the earth a desert. The life and ecosystem at this point has already been possibly irreparably damaged when it comes to human interaction. So even with individuals who are infected, who seek to promote infection, they are, to me, just as infected as the people that come in that are showing full signs, such as necrosis. The people who are, those things both have to be removed without anything slowing us down. And it's been, for me, an incredible ideologically learning experience. That I used to think that humans were an invasion, that we were the ones that were invading the space, that we needed to work with the ecosystems of the earth to work within its systems. And now I'm realizing that the earth it has effectively promoted this infection, and in some ways promoted the people living in it to flip over to the side of infection and promote this progress that they see as being the new norm of infection. And basically Mother Nature has been the weed that's devoured our growth, and that the earth is seeking to destroy, while the humans that reside here are the ones that have been bringing life and order and some sort of semblance of morality to try to keep us from a system where we simply, as nature does, devour itself. And now that we're saving this life, I feel that we're actually making a difference, and that we are presenting some sort of system of order that does not result in the destruction of every living thing on the planet. That, again, Mother Nature is promoting. And I think it's why we see desolate people trying to actively work against us, and they must be seen as the enemy and liquidated accordingly. And I know some people are going to probably say that's a cold way of doing it, but what is your other option? The other option is, no matter what happens, if we do not try to get ahead of what is now a winning adversary, then we're going to be having some Okay, that sounds like the alarm just went off, and
a lockdown has been initiated. Please follow your lockdown procedures.
I'm gonna check this out.
A lockdown has been initiated.
Oh my god. There's a large horde of these zombies coming towards the wall. We need to get all these people inside. The rescue team must have stirred them up. But we're headed to these defensive positions. I'm gonna need to stop this recording. Take everything that we have right now,